CBS Sports is not seeing it. They put out a piece where they ranked the head coaches on the hottest of seats. And I don't think a ton of people are surprised, but number one is Aaron Glenn. The top five from CBS: number five, Dan Quinn of the Commanders; number four, Zach Taylor of the Bengals; number three, Shane Steichen of the Colts; number two, our old friend Todd Bowles of the Buccaneers; and number one, the head coach of the New York Jets going into his second year following a 3-14 year one, Aaron Glenn. Omari, do you have any issue with Aaron Glenn being number one on this list?
I don't, because I felt that if the Jets were to walk away from Aaron Glenn, not many people would have been surprised, but I understand why they did, and especially when they hit the reset button. But a lot of these other coaches on here, outside of Dan Quinn, a lot of these guys have been given an opportunity. I mean, Zach Taylor has had Joe Burrow, and I know that he's been nicked up, but after making the Super Bowl and making the AFC Championship the year after Zach Taylor, he hasn't sniffed the playoffs. Shane Steichen, I mean, I think that's a longer conversation because that's between Chris Ballard and him. I don't think that that's all on Shane Steichen. And I do think that Shane Steichen is one of the more innovative minds in the NFL. Todd Bowles, I'm not the biggest Todd Bowles fan, and he has made the playoffs. But again, that's a talented roster. But again, they're in transition as well too. So a lot of those guys there, I wouldn't say I fully agree with. And then Dan Quinn, he went from I believe they won 12 or 13 games there for his first year there. And then Jaden Daniels missed 10 games. So some of those aren't fair, but with Aaron Glenn, I mean, you can't argue. I think he has the hottest coaching seat. I mean, it's so hot that we both agree that week one is a must-win game. So that alone lets you know where Aaron Glenn's, job security is right now. So I don't think anyone can argue with that. And I think if anyone is arguing with that, they're wearing, green colored Oakleys, because you just have to be honest.
Now, if the NFL was run how like it should be run, like Zach Taylor, I think should be, you could argue, number one in the list because he's been there forever and they haven't won. He's had a Hall of Fame quarterback. And yes, there's been injuries to Burrow along the way, but I don't know if we look at Zach Taylor and think, yep, that's a great coach. But the Bengals are notorious for being cheap and they don't want to basically pay a coach to not coach them. So I think that's a big reason why Zach Taylor's 4 on this list and he's not as high as, say, Bowles or Glenn at number 1. But, one thing that I think stands out is Shane Steichen is number 3 here. And you look at the Colts, they were all in last year, as we know, making the Sauce Gardner deal, giving the Jets 2 first-round picks and Adonai Mitchell, thinking that they had a team that could win a championship. They completely collapsed. Daniel Jones getting hurt had a lot to do with it. But, this is a Colts team that has new ownership. I know, it's still in the Irsay family, but when Jim died, it was passed down to his daughters. So it's a new, deciding figurehead that is running the organization. They already made their all-in move last year. They're bringing Daniel Jones back. The GM, Chris Ballard's been there for a while. He's hired multiple coaches. Kind of feels like if the Colts can't figure it out, it could be a complete tear down and they blow the whole thing up. I like seeing that, knowing that the Jets do have their first-round pick for another year, as we all know.
I mean, listen, the World Cup is going on right now, so there's a lot of hate watching right now. But as soon as the calendar goes over to September, it's going to be a huge hate watch for me personally for the Indianapolis Colts. So I'm going to be rooting for them to be as awful as they can be. And again, I think Chris Ballard should be on the hot seat more than Shane Steichen. And I understand that they're going to be, grouping together, and rightfully so. You're not going to fire your GM and then have the owner and the coach pick the next GM. But again, when you miss at quarterback, Jake, as you know, man, that can set you back 5 years. So I think they were incredibly lucky. And some of the moves that they made, they still have to be all in. Trading 2 1s for a cornerback, no matter how you feel about the deal, forces you to pay Daniel Jones the contract that he signed. And I believe he signed 2 years for $88 million. So he's making $44 million a year. And then that also forces you with making the trade for Adonai Mitchell, as you alluded to, Jake, that you have to make Alec Pierce the highest paid wide receiver in free agency ever. So regardless of how you feel about Alec Pierce, we all know that it's not always about, who deserves it. It's all about who's next. And his timing, kudos to him. I believe he signed a 4-year, $117 million deal. So again, they are all in. All the chips are pushed right in the middle. And again, if the optics weren't as bad, Jake, you'd be right. Shane Steichen would be at the top there. But I'll tell you one thing though. Shane Steichen is a great offensive mind, and if Shane Steichen was available, I think that's another conversation that we have as well too.
I'm talking about Zach Taylor. I think would be.
Zach Taylor. Okay.
I do agree with you on Steichen though. I do think he's a pretty decent coach given some of the limitations he's had at quarterback. I depending on how it looks for the Colts, I wouldn't be completely against the Jets giving Steichen a real interview because we want someone with experience. We want someone, preferably, I think, who's known for working with quarterbacks and being an offensive guy. So Steichen not as high as, say, Kevin O'Connell, who we'll talk about in just a
No.
bit if he ever became available, but he's certainly someone that intrigues me at least a little bit. But the Jake Asman Show is now presented by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is a daily fantasy app made simple. Just pick more or less on your favorite players' projections and build your lineup in seconds. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code HMA to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. And PrizePicks is already offering NFL futures, including futures for New York Jets players. Take a look at the lineup that you see on the screen. Garrett Wilson, more than 4.5 reception touchdowns. David Bailey, he's going to have at least 7 sacks his rookie year. Arvell Reese, almost a Jet. I think he'll have at least 3 sacks in his rookie year with the Giants. That is a 3-pick power play, $10 to pay out $60. That is just an example of some of the lineups you can make over at PrizePicks. Make your own lineups today for any sport. Just download the PrizePicks app, use the code HMA, and get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. You know, I see some pushback in the comments saying, oh, Glenn shouldn't be number one. The reality is they won 3 games in his first year. And the narrative was that he could have been fired at the end of last year. And the reason why he wasn't fired was because Woody Johnson didn't want to pull the plug after he gave him a 5-year contract. And this was Woody's first hire of a coach that he made and had the final say on in a decade since he hired the number 2 guy, ironically, on this list, Todd Bowles. Remember, his brother was the one who hired the infamous Adam Gase, and Joe Douglas, with his brother overseeing it, was the one who hired Robert Saleh. Woody was still the ambassador in the UK in the Trump administration during that time. So, you know, Glenn's got to prove that he can coach. So let's just be blunt. I mean, last year was an unmitigated disaster. You know, we often would say, you know, what does Aaron Glenn do well? And people would struggle to come up with the answer to that. Well, now he's taking over the defensive play calling. They made a bunch of moves to get personnel that fits the style and type of defense he wants to deploy. There's no excuse. He's got to go out there and prove that he's got a feel for coaching the whole team and specifically the defense. So here's the question I have for you. What does Aaron Glenn have to do to save his job and get off this hot seat power ranking list?
I think he needs to get off to a fast start. So starting off 1-0 would do tremendous in terms of getting the heat off of his back. I think the defense needs to have an identity. I think the team overall, but the defense, because that's going to have his fingerprints and his blueprints on it. You know, you want the whole team to. But again, I've said this. I think just like you said, Jake, he's brought in specific people to do what he needs them to do. So when you bring in Sweat, Onyemata, you bring in Demario Davis, I'm expecting the team to be top 12 against the run. All right. I want them to be opportunistic. They need to be fast, physical, and they need to have an identity. You know, the offense is going to take a little bit. You know, it's a new play caller, new quarterback. They're relying on a lot of young pass catchers. So, and a lot of unproven guys as well, too. So the offense may take, you know, hopefully it doesn't take more than a quarter of the season, but the defense, they have to get off to a fast start in order to, for the fans and even for the players as well too, Jay, because there's some times where you can even see, like when you've been losing a lot, and some of the players from this core, you know, the Brees, the Garretts, who else, even Olu to that standpoint, you know, once they give up a turnover or once adversity starts to hit, you can tell, Jay, like you can tell, like when Braylon Allen fumbled that ball in the Miami game, you kind of knew that they were gonna crumble after that. So I think getting off to a fast start, and Aaron Glenn showing that he is worth his chops on defense can go a long way for him. And if they were able to start off at 2-0, then we'd be having completely different conversations. So I think for him to, you know, establish some confidence and some goodwill with the players and also with the fans and more importantly, ownership, I think the defense needs to get off to a fast start. And from, you know, everything I know that is just shorts and t-shirts, they looked good. They look good. I know those OTAs, but the defense looked fast and they look good. And they've added some professionals at every level.
I think getting off to a fast start is paramount because I think people will say, well, he's got to win X amount of games. And yes, winning ultimately is going to be a major, major factor in whether or not the head coach, after winning only 3 games in his first season, gets a third season. But I think it goes beyond just the win total, right? Getting off to a fast start. How do you look against Salah early on in the year? How do you look against division opponents? They were 0-6 against the AFC East. They had the worst point differential. I saw the stat the other day. The worst point differential in the modern NFL against division opponents. Like since like the merger or division realignment, you take it a step further, they've had the worst point differential against division opponents in a single season last year. Like they were not competitive in games against the Dolphins, the Bills, or the Patriots. Not good enough, not acceptable. So how are you against division opponents? How are you when you have more time to prepare for an opponent? We can't even say how are you in prime time because they don't have any. But like you go down the line throughout the course of a season, and there's certain things you got to check off if you're going to be able to get a third year. I think if they win 6 games, no matter what happens, I think he's gone. If he wins 7, I think it really depends on some of these factors we're talking about. I think if he wins 8 and he's the first Jet head coach to do that since Todd Bowles in 2015, that's how long it's been. I think he's more than likely back for a third year, but like I feel like people are just trying to put a win number on it, and I don't know if it's necessarily all about the wins. It's how it looks as well along the way.
Yeah, it has to be optics, Jake, because we already know that wins. I'm a firm believer, and actually, I don't even know if I've got your take on this. I don't think that wins carry over. So if you win 3 out of the last 4 games and teams aren't even playing their starters and people are mentally checked out, those aren't going to carry over into 2027. I don't believe that. So I think that if you're going to win 7 games, you better be some of those losses, those 10 losses, at least 3 or 4 of them need to be one possession games where the Jets were right in it. Maybe they missed a field goal, or maybe Geno throws an interception or something like that while they were driving. I think optics are going to be huge for Aaron Glenn, because last year he came in the door, and I think that's why why there was so much anger, because he came in saying that we were going to compete. So fans, no matter what the roster looked like, no matter what he and Muji did in terms of free agency, it didn't look like a team that was ready to compete. No disrespect, but if Josh Reynolds is your number 2 wide receiver and Alan Lazard is your number 3, and you're trying to piece it together with Tyler Johnson, that doesn't scream to me like a team that's ready to compete. So I never really believed that when he came in. So yeah, it's going to be a huge optics. Everything that he does is going to be under a microscope. No dancing on the sideline. Everything that Aaron Glenn does is going to be under a microscope. Yeah, and I think honestly, Jake, I think anything short of 8 games, he's probably not going to be back. He's probably not going to be back, because then you're looking, we're going to get into coaching and things like that. You're going to start looking like, hey, okay, what's the draft position? Are the Jets going to be in line for a quarterback, which I'm sure we're going to start speaking with the college football season starting next month. Who do you really, we already know what the formula is, because we're going to talk about some guys here. You want to marry that young, innovative offensive mind with that young coach. And Aaron Glenn isn't an offensive coach. He's a defensive guy. So he's going to have to do a lot. I think the wins are going to have to be there. I think the sentiment in the locker room and the ownership is going to have to be there. And I think the optics and how the outside world is viewing the Jets, they're all going to have to be there. So he has an uphill battle.
And I think to your point, like if we're not sure how we feel at the end of the second year, like this is one of the few times when the Jet head coaching opening could actually be viewed as one of the more attractive jobs in the league. So unless you're definitively like assertive, hey, we got our guy. Last year was an outlier. It was an anomaly. He was learning on the job. He made the necessary corrections, and he's our guy going forward. Unless you feel that way, like you're confident you got the right head coach, to me, like the tiebreaker should be you move on, because you're an attractive job. For one, you won't have 10 other openings around the league like you had this past year. Like statistically, that just can't happen. There's been 2/3 of the league that's turned over head coaches the last 2 seasons alone. So there won't be 10 openings. 2, you have $100 million in cap space, 3 first-round picks, and we think the roster's not awful. Like there's players here. So will the Jet job be more attractive than it would be after this upcoming year potentially, right? Obviously, some things need to play out, like the 2027 QB class lives up to it and actually, plays well, unlike what happened this past year. But let's say there's a couple quarterbacks that are legit and the Jets are in position to get one of those guys. That cap space, your roster, New York, high-paying job, it's an attractive job. So if you're not sure on Glenn, I almost think you got to move on. Like he's got to do such a good job this year that we're like, yep, he's the guy. We're definitely bringing him back, and not leave it up for gray area. Otherwise, I think you got to move on, because your job's attractive to get a proven commodity that could be your next head coach.
I think that's Jake. You hit the nail right on the head. And honestly, after look at where the Knicks were, and I know that it's apples to oranges. The Knicks could have easily said, "Hey, listen, Tom Thibodeau turned this thing around. He got us to an Eastern Conference Finals. Let's just run it back. Let's just try to get over the hump with Tom Thibodeau." But no, Leon Rose made the tough decision. And honestly, I take this. Remember, Bill Parcells used to say, "Listen, if you have two quarterbacks, you probably don't have one." So if you're just like you said, if you're unsure, if there's any doubt in your mind that this coach isn't the guy, then he's not your guy. You know, the way that the way that Les Snead feels about Sean McVay, the way the Chicago's GM, I believe is Ryan Pace, feels about Ben Johnson. Those guys know they're assertive. The way John Lynch feels about Kyle Shanahan, they know. All they have to do is they have to get the right people in the building, and those guys are going to take care of it. And I think that coaching, and as what we're going to get into next, coaching is paramount, especially in the NFL.
Yep. And like, again, because keeping him is not just, oh, you keep him for another year and then you'll see. These are major franchise altering decisions that he is presiding over. If you keep him for another year, you keep him for a third year, say they draft Arch Manning or Dante Moore or whoever emerges at quarterback for the Jets to select, then you're potentially making the Darnold mistake all over again where, well, here's Todd Bowles for a year with Sam, and then you fire him and bring in a new coaching staff with Gase. And it's like, how many times do you want to change the head coach and the OC for your young quarterback? You make it harder for that guy to blossom and develop. Trevor Lawrence, look how many coaches he had before they finally found stability and got the right guy to maximize his skill set. And he was a generational, they said, QB prospect. So that's why I say either Glenn proves he's the guy, or if you're not sure, or obviously if he's just clearly not, you're moving on because you got to go and search for that guy. Otherwise, you're just going to be continuously on this hamster wheel of ineptitude until you get the right coach with the right quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, and then you could even look at the CJ Stroud situation right here. D'Amico Ryans, we all think that he's a great coach. So even if Aaron Glenn does prove that he's a good coach, you're going to constantly, just like you said, be chasing an offensive coordinator, because what's going to happen? Let's say that, Frank Reich does a tremendous job. What's the shelf life on Frank Reich, Jake? 2-3 years, maybe tops. And then after that, you're going to be searching for another OC. And then guess what? If this quarterback that we have is really the goods, whoever you think that is going to be, you're going to keep chasing an offensive coordinator trying to make sure that relationship works, because what do offensive coordinators do? They become head coaches. So again, they're just, getting that head coach that's an offensive minded guy really can set you up for sustained success. And I think that that's all that Jets fans are truly focused on right now. So,
hey, here's the deal. Just got no chance unless you click on that like button. And you got to make sure you subscribe to the Jake Asman Show. You don't, you can get the f*** out. Now let's go, Asmaniacs. We're built for this shit.